Uh, anyway, hello everybody. I'm the Meister from Brews and Tunes. I'm here with Sarah and Jeff Teets from MindMaze. Thank you very much for meeting with me. And happy birthday to Sarah.
Thank you.
Nice. So why don't we start with kind of what's going on now with the band. And so you guys just recently released a brand new single, and yeah, you got the shirt. Nice.
Yeah. Basically, we've been in kind of like a little bit of like a weird limbo for a little while now. We've been sitting on like a few new songs that we've been intending to release as an EP. We still might be releasing it as an EP. I'm not actually 100% sure yet. We're kind of like in a weird place where we're just sort of like shopping around to, different labels, and we still have a really good relationship with the label that released the second and third albums, Interwound Recordings, but we're just kind of like entertaining different ideas and offers and just figuring out like what exactly is going to be like the best way to go about releasing it, which it kind of sucks because like we've been sitting on the music for a while, but we figured we'd release, like we've trickled some like cover songs and stuff out to like some of our like the people that pledged to our crowdfunding and whatever, but we just figured like everyone kind of was due for like some type of new music at this point, so
Nice. Yeah, because you did a cover of a Queensryche song that you released earlier this year. I think that was back in May, if I remember correctly.
Something like that, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you mean what feels like May of 3 years ago at this point, but yeah, it was shockingly only a few months ago. Just everything feels like time is just dragging on and on right now. So
right.
It's definitely been weird for us not being able to play shows because we're pretty open about the fact that we're a live band. We enjoy playing live, and without being able to do that, it's kind of made things challenging for sure. So
imagine, yeah. And you guys did a free live stream about a month ago, which was fantastic, which was really cool. Do you have any plans of doing something like that again?
We're talking about it. There's nothing like concrete. I don't know what the status is at the moment as far as like, I know like right around the time we did ours, like all the articles started going around about like Facebook kind of like putting like the kibosh on like all like those like streaming type shows. Not that doesn't mean we couldn't do it. It's just that if we can't do it through Facebook, we have to decide, what's the best way to go about it. But the place that we did ours at last month had like really nice kind of like infrastructure in place as far as like they had they had a room, venue, whatever, with
I guess normally it's actually
it is actually a venue. We've played worse for real shows, so but they have like professional sound, sound guy knows really what he's doing, and video stuff is all set up. I mean, it's just like a one camera, but it's like a good quality feed at least, so they kind of have like all that stuff there in place. So considering how much it seemed like everyone really enjoyed the first one, we pretty much immediately started talking about doing another one. It's just a matter of us sort of getting those details and figuring out when. I want to do another one and do like a completely different set list because that's just the person I am.
Nice. So maybe talk a little bit about the new song, the Stand Your Ground. What prompted that? What was the impetus of that?
A lot of these, the newer stuff that we've been working on, including stuff that we're even still writing now, is largely kind of like, I don't want to be like it's going in a different direction, but like, this band's always kind of been about combining elements and not really being like one narrow kind of thing, like just a power metal band, just a progressive metal band, just like a traditional metal or a hard know, try some different stuff within like power metal, prog metal, hard rock, traditional metal, whatever. You know, lean in a different direction for a while and just have fun with it. So since like Resolve was, you know, a little over the top for like the prog, moody, kind of like emotional stuff for, you know, what we normally do, we kind of figured like, well, let's like swing really hard like in another direction and do some stuff that's like a little bit more I don't want to use the word retro, but like, you know, hard rock and traditional metal and just sort of like straightforward, and concentrate a little bit more on just like writing like the best songs we can, you know, with like, you know, cool hooks and, you know, stuff like that. Maybe like a little bit of like a mixture of like some older like 70s and, you know, early 80s influences, but in like a somewhat more like modern perspective. And the other thing too is that like we've been writing this material very different than the way a lot of our older material was conceived, where like usually I just put together, you know, ideas myself, and I was kind of always like the main songwriter. And you know, I'm still bringing in like most of like the riff ideas and, you know, that type of stuff, but we're actually like fleshing these songs out like as a group for the most part, you know, and like writing a little bit more collaboratively, which kind of goes, I think, really nice with the fact that they're supposed to have like a little bit more of like, I guess, like an organic kind of approach.
And then, you know, similarly, I kind of want to, at least for this song in particular, there are other songs that we've already written that I didn't really approach this way with the lyrics, but I kind of just, with this song, I was like, this just sounds like a very energetic, like kick-ass, like, you know, in-your-face kind of song, and I just wanted to write lyrics that went with that. And I feel like, you know, through all the times that we're living in, you know, especially in the U.S. and I mean, really all over the world.
In these uncertain times.
Yes. Okay, that's like every commercial.
Yeah.
That's like, these unprecedented times, we're here for you. But, you know, I just thought that it represents a lot of, you know, kind of a way that I've used my own sort of resolve. I was like, I don't even want to say, I tried so hard to think of another word to say because I just didn't want to say that one. But to try to get over this sort of hump and push through all this stuff that's going on, and, you know, really it's about standing up for what you believe in and sticking to your guns and being committed to stuff. So, you know, kind of pretty straightforward metal lyrical content right there. So
it's a great song. It's a great song. So yeah, people haven't.
Thank you.
No, they need to definitely. Yeah, you can listen to it on Spotify. You can, you know, on iTunes. You can purchase it. So yeah, everybody out there, go pick it up. It's great. Well, why don't we go back in time and kind of talk about how you guys started in music? What were, you know, what started you both on the musical path that you're on? And did you start young? Is it you know, are there musicians in your family? Kind of how did that all start?
Not really, like in terms of like musicians in our family, at least our like immediate family. Like our parents are not musicians. They're not, you know, really like huge music people. I mean, like they like music, but
you
like,
know, and weren't metal fans at all.
Yeah, like, you know, our parents definitely are not like the thing that drove us to like a lot of the music that we listened to. It was, you know, just sort of like, I guess like I just kind of like fell into like rock music and metal music and whatever, like a lot in part thanks to like the internet, you know, like I just kind of like started poking around when I was like 11, 12, you know, like when I first started actually using the internet, and kind of like once I discovered Maiden, like, and I got involved in like the Iron Maiden fandom, essentially, like through their old message board, it was like a domino effect. You know, it was like this guy turned me on to power metal, and this guy turned me on to like progressive metal, and this guy, you know, it's like that had a lot to do with like the music taste thing more so than like actual family or friends or whatever at the time. And as far as like the actual like musician thing goes, like she has a much more like, I guess, interesting background prior to like this band, or you know what became this band, because like I mean,
I guess sort of more of a traditional background in the sense that, like, yeah, you know, when you're in elementary school, when we were in third grade, they like force everybody to play the recorder. So we did that, but then in the fourth grade, it's like, you know, they want you to try to learn how to play an instrument. Like that was something. And it's weird because it was really strongly advocated for people like for kids to do that back then, but I kind of have to wonder now how much they even really care about teaching kids to play instruments. But it was kind of like a big deal. Like I remember when I was in the fourth grade, everybody like that wanted to play an instrument, like you got to pick the instrument you want to play, and you got to pick your top choices, and you know, it was like kind of a big deal. And my first choice was the flute, and yeah, I just kind of went with that, and it sort of just became, that's where music sort of started for me. I actually didn't really get into singing for like a number of years after that. Singing wasn't the thing that really sparked my music interest. I always did sing, but when I was like younger, you know, in the times of me watching Disney movies and stuff, and I wanted to sing along to those, specifically Pocahontas, that was like the big thing for me at that age. But I was so like petrified to sing in front of everyone. Like my family really wanted me to, and I kind of just was like, no, like I have to go stand in the other room. Like I just didn't want to. Like I was kind of scared to perform in front of people. So, you know, I think that's part of why it took a little longer for singing to sort of take off for me, because I was kind of scared to do it for a long time. But yeah, I played the flute and I just really enjoyed it. And I was obviously in band in school and took lessons in school like that way, but I kind of just started listening to music I liked and whatever, and trying to play along to it, like play the vocal melodies along with flute and stuff. And that's sort of where I got into like learning stuff by ear, and you know, where I really kind of developed the actual love to just play music and want to do it. And you know, that was years before I was into rock or metal also. Like I started playing flute when I was in the fourth grade, and then it wasn't until like eighth grade, like when I was in middle school, that I really started getting into rock music. I was like really into bands. Like I loved Aerosmith in the eighth grade. That was like one of my first bands I really liked, and Bon Jovi. And the Goo Goo Dolls were so popular then. So it's just like, I liked them too. And it was a lot more like mainstream stuff like that you would have heard on the radio, even if there were these bands like Aerosmith and Bon Jovi that were like retro in nature, but they were still like massively popular
rock radio
in like 2000 or 2002 when I started really listening to this stuff. So then I kind of started to get into that. And then it was like, eighth grade was also around the time when I had a music teacher, just like a general music class, and they kind of made us sing in the class. And the one day he was just like, you know, you should really join choir. And I was kind of just like, nah, that stuff's really cheesy and dumb. Like, I don't want to sing that music. For some reason, like, I thought like chorus was so lame.
All right.
But like, you know, the instrumental part of it, like playing flute and like symphonic band and stuff like that, never was lame to me. It was always, but the singing part was lame, so I just didn't want to do that. But to kind of make a long story short here, he kind of pushed me into that, and then that sort of led me down that path. And like in high school, I did every music group possible. It was like I was huge into marching band and like all the symphonic bands, and I was in the choir and the chorale, and like my chorale sang at the White House when I was in high school, and like all this crazy stuff. So yeah, and around the same time, you know, we decided to start doing a metal band too. So there was just a lot happening, I guess.
Yeah, that was like, I think about a 7-minute sentence.
Probably.
But Yeah, I mean, the only like real, like, I guess even somewhat interesting thing as far as like, you know, me as a musician is that I didn't start playing guitar. I actually started playing drums. Just because honestly, well, I wanted to play guitar when I was like a kid, like maybe like 7, 8, 9 years old. And I think I had like some crappy, just throwaway guitar. And I never got anywhere with it. I like totally like didn't have like the discipline at that age to try to learn. And it's like then I was just like, not to make fun of drummers, but like I was like, well, drums seem easy, so like I pretty much, you know, was able to get a drum kit, and you know, I played for a while, and then really like I started playing guitar a little bit on the side, and then pretty much just ended up switching over largely because it seemed like I knew more people that were at least passable drummers than that were decent guitar players, like that could like, I mean, I wasn't very good at the time. I was like, you know, 14, but like could at least kind of, you know, play the kind of music that I wanted to play, weren't just playing like, you know, 4 chords on an acoustic guitar or whatever. So I pretty much just started playing guitar because it was easier to find a drummer to play with. And then obviously just stuck with it and pretty much gave up drums entirely for quite a while. And then got back into them, and then, you know, over and it like, yeah. So over time, it's just been like, for me, it's just been like pick up instrument and just sort of like, you know, teach myself. Because it's like I've never really had any lessons or anything like that. I took music theory classes in school. Which
again, there's something that doesn't exist anymore, but we were really fortunate in that
our
respect.
high school had like a college level music theory program in
Oh, wow.
it. So that was really, I think, kind of like where I learned really how to write music, like from a technical standpoint at least. So but yeah, as far as like the playing, it's like a few years after I really switched to guitar, I got like obsessively into Savatage for a while, so I taught myself how to play piano because I just wanted to be John Oliva. So, and I mean, that still shows very much like in the piano parts that pop up in our songs. It's very much like that, in that vein, because I'm still not really a good keyboard player. I'm just like good enough to get like, you know, the ideas across. And yeah, over the past like year, I've been playing bass a lot in my spare time now too, because I finally got a bass. And I'm just one of those people that like, if you give me an instrument, I'm gonna have to try to learn how to play it. So
That's great. How did the band come together? How did that start? What was the, you know, did one of you decide like, hey, I want a rock band and I want my sibling to be in the band, and you know?
I feel like it was just like we didn't know any other people at the time. Like it was the easiest, you know. Oh, here's 2 people we already know that want to do this, you know. So that made it easy because we very obviously, you know.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like the earliest roots of this band really go back to like me being about 14, Sarah being like 16, or maybe even 13 or 15. But like, I had a friend who was, you know, again, we weren't good at the time. Like, you know, was about as good of a drummer as I think I probably was as a guitarist around that point. And it's like we kind of just started, you know, jamming for fun, just playing like really, really awful reinterpretations of songs that we knew, and you know, maybe tried a little bit to mess around with trying to write on our own. And I actually then met another guitar player who was like sort of like the spark to be like, oh, well, now we have this other guy that we know that he's, you know, again at the time like same, you know, skill level as a player. So we're like, well, we have 2 guitarists now, like we could actually probably, you know, start to make this like a band. And then it kind of just sort of, you know, picked up momentum, and it's like we wrote maybe like 5 songs and started gigging and just playing.
Tried to record a horrible garage demo, you know. sort of all the hallmark things that you do when you're a teenager
Yeah.
in a band that has no idea what you're doing. So
and basically, you know, we gigged for a few years and, you know, got better, and some people came and went, and, you know, whatever. And it just kind of like all gradually led us to the point where we basically didn't form a new band as much as we kind of just changed our name and just sort of like reset everything about like 9 years ago, because we were just like, well, that was like the kid band, you know, we got to clean the slate somehow, and we were getting ready to record the album that became Mask of Lies at the time. So we were just like, you know what, now's the time. Let's just change our name, like kind of like rebrand, put this album out independently, and, you know, see what happens. So I mean, it really is all like a continuation of that same timeline. There's a few songs on Mask of Lies that were written, you know, back in that time period. At least initially, some were really like redrafted over the years, but there's a couple songs on Mask of Lies that like go back to, you know, us being like teenagers. So it's probably why I'm like extra sick of those.
Yeah, that is one thing I've always wondered about with bands. You know, you hear sometimes, you know, when you have a song that's you played for literally 20 years, you know, and that do you still have that same spark, or is it like, oh God, we have to play this song again?
I mean,
it just depends. It's weird. Some of them kind of like go through phases, like where at one point we like hate it and we don't want to play it. And then there's other songs like we specifically have noted about Never Look Back. Never Look Back's one of those songs that's been around for quite a while, because
2007.
it actually was like on, you know, the prior incarnation like of the band, before we were MindMaze, on a demo that we did as that band. But we kind of recently started playing it again, and now that I've sort of started playing more keyboards in the live setting, like we do the harmony lead with like keyboard and guitar, and now that that's like back in the song and it's not just Jeff trying to play kind of his hodgepodge of like, I don't know, the screen started to go off and I got scared, but I was like, oh God, it's gonna stop again.
I think the screensaver just like
yeah,
to come on.
I hadn't moved my mouse in a while, but
yeah, there's a I think it's the Dream Theater, like once in the 5 years in a lifetime DVD. There's like a thing that Mike Portnoy says on there where he says, you know, to play a song for, you know, the 1,000th or 10,000th time or whatever, like in a rehearsal room or, you know, in a practice space or whatever, it's a little boring, you know, it's a little dull if you don't keep finding ways to at least sort of make it interesting for yourself. But anytime you're like on a stage, and especially like for a band like us, that it's like us having fans that actually like really care about the music is something we really appreciate, you know. And we don't get to play shows like that often, where, you know, like we do a lot of gigs where it's like support gigs for, you know, bigger bands or whatever, where we're not really playing to our audience. You know, they may enjoy it, like they may be visibly interested, but they don't know the songs. So anytime we play a gig, like even if it's like, you know, some like dive venue in front of, you know, a pretty small crowd, like if we have a bunch of people there that like are singing along and are like into, I'm like, I am never going to be bored of doing it in that setting, you know.
Yeah, like we play when we a specific show that comes to mind, and it's sadly one of the last shows we've played because we've played so few shows in the last year. Last summer we played at the Whiskey, which obviously was pretty awesome for the fact that it was the Whiskey, and, you know, it's something that anybody who's in a band pretty much anywhere in the world in this style of music, especially in the US though, you know, you kind of get into the music and you grow up with your musical like lifespan, I guess. always hearing about the Whiskey, like it's such a legendary venue, and so it was really cool to play there in general. But I think my favorite part about us doing that show was that a lot of our fans showed up. I mean, to be honest, like our fans were the majority of the audience, and we weren't even technically headlining the show. So that was a pretty great feeling, and the people there were super into it. And yeah, like we played the song "Breaking the Chains," which is the oldest song we have that's still around.
It's the oldest MindMaze song.
And it was pretty cool to stand up there and be like, yeah, this is a song I wrote when I was like 16, and I never thought I'd get to perform it on the stage at the Whiskey A Go-Go, but here we are. So, sometimes moments like that can really, make what seems like something you've done 8 million times really seem special.
Yeah, I have, like, as a lot of people who know me or just, follow me on social media know, like, I'm a huge, like, music junkie in the sense that I analyze, like, everything, and I'm like hyper analytical of a lot of stuff, and it's like every now and then, like we've been doing this thing in our fan group that we have on Facebook where we're actually asking people to vote, to basically we're determining like a ranking of all of our songs, like as voted on by our fans. And like I'm sitting there some days like checking the poll results while I'm at work, and I'm like, what's wrong with you people? There's no way this song is better than these other songs. And I'm like, it's really funny, like as a creator of music, or really art in general, like you're always going to have a very different like lens, I think, by which like you view your own work, and that certain things are going to stick out as like a song that I'm proud of or we're proud of or whatever, because we remember what it was like to write it, what it was like to record it, what, like if it is inspired by or has something to do with like some moment in our lives, or we have all of that, whereas like the audience has none of that meaning for us, but they have that for themselves. They have their own meanings that they associate stuff with. So I don't even remember what we're supposed to be talking about at this point. But.
Yeah, that was good.
I honestly don't know either.
Yeah, just next question.
It's funny. This is a little side note, but Jeff recently got me into Marillion. I'm obsessed with them now.
Okay.
And it started because Jeff was really into them.
And now I'm not, because she is.
But their singer Steve Hogarth does a podcast called The Corona Diaries. Shout out there. It's pretty neat. Like, it's funny and amusing, and he talks about all these stories about them being on tour and stuff they've gone through. And he was talking about on the episode that I last listened to about how when he used to talk a lot during interviews, and their like actual PR person used to like hold signs up behind the person interviewing him that like was indicating that he should shut up. And it's like every time that we, talk forever, now I just kind of think of that as like we need our own version of signs to be like, stop talking now.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to ask you about. Has Marillion impacted your music at all? Because it seems like especially the last album, there are some elements there. I felt like, especially with your guitar work. Not to say that you sounded, like exactly like Steve Rothery, but it just seems like there was some.
That wouldn't be an insult.
It felt like, especially some of the more ethereal sounds. That kind of reminds me a little bit of Marillion. So
yeah, I mean,
like them.
That's definitely like something that I was sort of consciously aware of. It's funny. I got way more into like their overall catalog actually in the last few years since we made that album, but I was obsessively listening to Clutching at Straws around the time that we made Resolve. And there's like one or two guitar parts here or there that it's like definitely like that was what I had in mind. Like in particular, I know there's a clean guitar part in the middle of the song Drown Me that we literally like called it in like the Pro Tools file for like that, because the songs are really irregular, like the form is really goofy, so we have to just give these sections of the instrumental passages names just to keep track of them. So like that clean guitar part, and then it comes in with like a really prominent bass part that's very Marillion-esque, and the drums kind of have this like cross-sticking thing going on, and I'm like, yeah, we just called it like the Marillion part because it really does sound like that.
At that point, I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's that band that did Easter with Dream Theater on that DVD. I mean, that's how it all started. Like, that's how it started for us even knowing who Marillion were, because
Pretty much.
I mean, like, Jeff used to actually do an internet radio show with one of our friends who was actually one of the people who, like, you know, semi-proficiently played drums in earlier versions of our band, but he was like super into like the Fish era of Marillion. And I remember back when they were doing that, I was like, what is this? Like, I just like hated it so much. I was just like, I can't, like, it just wasn't for me at that point in my life. I mean, similarly, I went through kind of a revelation with like Sabotage. When I first heard Sabotage, I only liked the Zach Stevens stuff. Like, I couldn't listen to John Oliva's voice. I hated it. And it's somehow we went, but I feel like sometimes I have that with certain things, you know.
It's the horseshoe effect. Like, you're when you hate something, you're closer to loving it than you are to being indifferent to it.
Yeah, you actually have some strong emotion towards it. So it's like, but you know, that just wasn't the like era of Marillion that was going to get me into them. So, you know, it took me,
it basically took, it took me getting into like the majority of their catalog then to then like pick out stuff and to show to her and be like, oh, I think you'd like this song, or you'd like this song, you know.
I will say that's been a nice thing about us, you know, being siblings, is Jeff's so, like,
I curate playlists for everybody.
Obsessively into stuff that, like, he finds everything in, like, every corner of everywhere, and is like, this is the stuff that you should listen to because you'll like it. And, you know, it makes it easier for me to, like, find things, because I'm not nearly as, you know, in depth with, you know, browsing the internet or looking around for stuff. Like, I'm kind of more like, if I listen to something and I really love it, or even if I just like it, I'll just listen to that for like a long time. You know, like I'll sit with it for a while instead of just being like, oh, this is cool, so what else is like that? Or what guy was in this band? Like, you know, I feel like he's instantly trying to connect the dots to stuff that I'm just like, oh, I really like this, and I just listen to it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like, everyone else in the band and, like, my girlfriend and some of my friends, like, they pretty much, yeah, through, like, me, they just are always going to have somebody that's like, oh, hey, you'd probably like this thing. You should check it out, you know, because anytime I hear a band that fits a certain style, I'm like, oh, X or Y person would like this band, and they might not be like, aware of them or whatever. But I was going to say something that actually, yeah, I am not going to be able to remember it now. Yeah, like, but yeah, I mean, I float back and forth. This was it. Like, I kind of float back and forth between being the kind of person that will just really want to listen to the music I already know I like, versus the kind of person that just wants to spend time discovering stuff and recontextualizing my, like, appreciation of music. That's like the most pretentious sentence in the world. But you know, like, literally this entire month of October, I just decided I was going to spend this whole month listening to essentially like my 100 favorite albums of all time but I have a rule, one album per artist, which is just really to prevent like 4 bands from dominating the list.
There's like 6 Maiden albums on there.
Like 4, yeah, like, but so that, I mean, that's honestly what I've been doing, like, most of, like, the past, like, month or so, is honestly just, like, listening to stuff I do know I love, but, I mean, some of these albums I haven't listened to in a long time, even though I know I love them. And also, it's kind of cool because I've been very much, like, writing and trying to write lately, and it's really fun for me, actually. I get really inspired by going back and listening to all these bands that inspired me to want to do this type of stuff in the first place. And, you know, I'll hear something that's like, oh, it'd be cool to do something like that. We should try to write something like that, or, you know, whatever, like not deliberately copying, obviously, but, you know, you just get inspiration from listening to albums you really like. So, you know, it's been kind of fun, but it's like, then I'll spend like a whole month just being like, I'm going to do nothing but just like listen to, you know, new releases and, you know, I don't know, just like, you know, jazz fusion albums or something. So
That actually dovetails really well into my next question, which was who inspired you as a musician? You know, as a guitar player, who inspired you as a songwriter, and as a vocalist, who inspired you?
I mean, my default answer is always just like I'm just like Maiden. You know, it all goes back to Maiden for me. I mean, I'm very vocal about the fact that Adrian Smith is easily my favorite guitarist, biggest influence. Like, I would never argue for him being like the best, but I don't aspire to be like the best guitarist myself. I just want to say something, you know? And it's like, you know, that whole school of guitar players that I think he's born out of. You know, the guys like Michael Schenker and Gary Moore, and I'm completely losing my train of thought again. But but it's like, you know, those types of guitar players, like that's always been like what
John Sykes.
Yeah, John Sykes is
or like
good. Neil Sean. Like,
people always compare Jeff to Vivian Campbell. And
yeah, that's one I get a lot.
You know, there's a good similarity there. So
I'm like, yeah, I'm very as a like a soloist, especially, like I'm much more rooted in like sort of like mid to late 70s and early 80s style of guitar than I am like, you know, super shredder stuff, like, or some of the more like over the top, like technical, you know, a lot of the vocabulary that like modern progressive metal guitarists play with is like vastly different from I think where I'm coming from. I mean, like, I do love some of those people also, and I mean, there's like no denying that like Dream Theater and John Petrucci is a huge influence on me and us in general. Like our bass player Rich is definitely a big, you know, he and I are like big Dream Theater junkies together, and he's an obsessive Rush fan, as like most bass players are. So, you know, we have like some of that stuff too. But yeah, I mean, as far as like songwriting goes, I mean, I already mentioned like the Sabotage thing. I love John Oliva. He's one of my he's probably one of my biggest like songwriting you know, influences that isn't like a guitar influence on me too in some capacity. I would say like you know, classic Queensryche, like the Chris DeGarmo, Jeff Tate, you know, writing dynamic that they seem to have. That's probably a pretty, you know, sizable influence on, I think, the way we kind of like approach the music we want to write. I love Fate's Warning as well. Jim's like one of my favorite songwriters, and especially lyricists. I mean, I don't write a lot of lyrics, but yeah, those are probably like the big ones, I guess. In hard rock and metal anyway. Like I'm like, I could get way outside and just start to, you know, just start being like, well, yeah, like one of my favorite like non-metal or hard rock artists is like Billy Joel. But,
I mean, Billy Joel is pretty like rock and roll, and his just, I mean, if you know anything about Billy Joel and just his attitude and some of the things he's done in his career over the years, like he is badass. Like I wouldn't really mess with him. So, but like for me, it's, you know, I could go into the different categories too, but I kind of have to mention, as far as being inspired to really want to get on stage and sing and stuff, that like, yeah, you know, we grew up, before we discovered rock and metal, listening to country music. Which seems really bizarre that, you know, with the kind of music that we make, but that is what we listened to when we were younger. And
it was largely, I mean, it was the mid to late 90s. I mean, country was at like a really big prevalence in like mainstream culture, you know.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, now that we've gotten into some of the stuff that we've gotten into and the rock and metal, like there's a lot of connections with some of those like musicians that were in like 80s bands that went on to produce or write country songs in the 90s. And, you know, sometimes when I hear some of that stuff, I can tell, oh, hey, this is this person that did that. But like, you wouldn't expect there to be a connection there. But yeah, that's what we listened to when we were younger. And the, like, specifically female artists in country were like bigger, and I think, like, I don't want to say more important, but more prevalent in the 90s.
They were less caricatures of like women in music, I think, is the thing. That it's like that was probably like a big inspiration to be like, look at all these strong women doing their own thing. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like,
more than like that's way more representation of that type of thing than there really was in rock and metal music at the time. You know, now I think things are like getting much, much better, to where over the last few years, there's been a lot of female fronted bands that play some radically different styles that are really great at what they do, you know. Anyway, yeah.
And yeah, it's not, but yeah, going along with that, it, you know, it just was super genuine. And I, like, Trisha Yearwood was one in particular, her and like Martine McBride and like Reba McEntire, like those kinds of artists really sort of inspired me to kind of want to sing and be that kind of, you know, person. And I feel like it did kind of translate going into rock and metal. It just sort of became something else, sort of. But like for rock and metal singers, I think the one that really, really like changed everything for me of being like, this is what I want to do, is Russell Allen. Because I've just always been really partial to these singers that are kind of more like the bluesy, I don't want to be like American, but kind of in that style. Like, because, you know, Russell Allen's very like Steve Walsh from Kansas, who I also love. And it's kind of just like a bluesy rock style in metal. Or like Jorn Lund is another one that sings like that. And I specifically remember when I was in high school, that first Alan Lund album came out, The Battle, and I was obsessed with it. I was like, oh my God, like these guys, the way they sang, like that was what I wanted to do. So that's always interesting to me, because people always ask me, what women in metal have inspired you? And they're really like, there's
contemporaries inspiring us now, but it's like there really were like no, like, it's weird, it's a big expectation subversion, I think, for people, but like we're not, you know, like we've never been like big Nightwish fans, or I mean they're fine, like I don't have anything against them, but like,
yeah, I mean, like, or
some
like,
of their stuff I do like, but like
I really respect like Doro.
Yeah.
But like she wasn't what I was listening to
yeah.
that like inspired me to like do this. Like, you know, it was like I remember being obsessed with that album, and like Russell Allen's a big one for me. But like Bruce Dickinson and Dio, like, you know, those are big ones that people always mention. But now, kind of, as I've spent as much time doing this as I have, you know, I really realized, like, for so long I didn't want to list people like Bruce Dickinson as an influence, because it's like you want to be like, oh well, I'm fancier than that.
I have better influences than you.
He's too like popular and like a generic choice, and everyone says that they're influenced by Dio and Bruce Dickinson and Rob Halford.
It's like another drummer saying Neil Peart is his biggest influence.
Right.
Yeah, or a bass player being like Geddy Lee, you know,
Steve Harris.
Yeah, you know. So I never wanted to say that, but they really did. The Bruce Dickinson stage presence thing, we've always been taking like a page from the Maiden book and how we want to present ourselves on stage, and
just with no budget.
Yeah. We don't have a mascot either, but
yeah.
You know, we're waiting for Buc-ee's from Texas to give us an endorsement, and we'll have a big Buc-ee on stage. But you know, that like high energy kind of just get out there and just, you know, be crazy, like that sort of stuff was what really made me want to be like, I want to sing in a metal band.
I like how, but we talk about this a lot, that it's like, for as power metal-y-ish as we get, we never name check a single power metal band or person from one at all.
I mean, I just talked about Russell Allen.
That's
so.
true. I mean, like, Symphony X is on that fence of, like, prog and power metal. But, like, so, like, I always feel like I need to put a footnote on like, this and be like, there were some other bands that I don't always jump to mentioning, but, yeah, because it's, like, we definitely have, like, this is mainly me more than anyone else, but it's, like, you know, there definitely is a little bit of that sort of, like, mid to late 90s European power metal, you know, you're well, I mean, they predate it obviously, but, like, you know, the Halloween Gamma Ray, Ed Guy, Stratovarius,
Yeah,
Blind
well,
Guardian, like
Tobias Sammet is another one that, like, I remember when we saw Ed Guy live, which is insane, because some of the things that we actually did get to see, I'm like,
yeah, we saw Ed Guy 4
it
times.
seems crazy now, but the first time we saw Ed Guy with Tad Morose opening for them, that was the first time that we ever saw Urban Breed, and, you know, which is crazy now too. But he's another singer that, you know, he's just awesome. But Tobias Sammet does the whole, like, Bruce Dickinson kind of run around, and he makes jokes on stage, and it's, you know, entertaining. It's more about being, like, a front man than even singing. Not that he's a bad singer, but it's more about, like, the showmanship aspect of it. And, you know, we kind of always wanted to have a little bit of that. Even if it wasn't like, you know, we get out there and just act totally ridiculous. But, you know, I feel like the best bands live are the bands that mix those things pretty well. Because, like, some prog fans would love it, but I personally don't like to go see a band that's just, like, standing in one spot chilling on stage.
It depends, you know. It's like the music vibe, I think, plays into it a lot, you know. Like, I couldn't imagine going to see, like, you know,
there's some bands that if they actually ran around while playing their music, it would be utterly stupid.
Like a good example of a band that I really enjoyed seeing live, but is so relatively, like, low energy, is like Catatonia. They pretty much just stand there on stage. It's like, but that works because their music does. It would be really weird if if it was like a super high energy, you know, like Anathema or like a band like that, just like running around the stage like crazy. And yeah, it's. But yeah, we make music that I think lends itself for the most part to, like, being relatively high energy and not taking ourselves, like, super seriously when we perform.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've never seen you live. I've just seen footage, and then I watched the live stream. But yeah, and you definitely have a very high energy, powerful stage presence, and you seem to really work well together as a band too. You seem.
Yeah, I mean, this lineup has now been together for almost 5.5 years, which is really. I mean, I know for some people they're like, that doesn't seem like that long, but I mean. We never had a lineup of either MindMaze or the band that predated it. Like, we never had the same exact lineup for more than maybe 2 years before. It was always just, and I mean, that's not to say that some of those, like, lineup changes weren't like amicable. It wasn't like people coming and going on friendly terms. There was a lot of that, you know, especially when you're in a band when you're young, and then you start getting older and people want to, like, go to college and get real jobs. But yeah, I mean, like, well, like, our bassist Rich actually was, like, in the band and then left just because he wanted to just sort of take, like, a year and go back to school, and he didn't think he'd be able to handle it, and he left. And Mike LaPond actually ended up essentially being his stand-in because we just happened to know Mike and live close enough together that it was, like, doable. But then, like, Rich just came back. Like, we never stopped being friends. He actually played a few gigs with us while he was technically not in the band. So, you know, at this point, I've been playing with Rich on and off for, like, over 8 years. And yeah, I mean, Mark's been with us for over 5. Our original drummer quit very badly when we had like multiple commitments for, you know, like basically like our first small tour, and then literally right after it, or while it was happening, was when we got the confirmation that we were actually going to get to do the support tour with Saxon. So it's like that really felt like we were about to kind of have like a moment, and it's like, oh shit, we don't have a drummer. And we just knew Mark because his, well, one, he lives very local to us. And he has played drums in like more than one band from like our sort of Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania music scene over the years. So it's like we played gigs with him in other bands, you know, we knew each other, and he was just willing to step up and learn this stuff. And we were just like, okay, well, let's just go with this for now. And then after like doing some tours together, we kind of were like,
oh, this actually
the chemistry is actually pretty good. And like we've managed to like, you know, travel thousands of miles together, and like I don't hate
not
you,
kill
so.
each other. Which, I mean, you know, people in bands should know that that's probably more challenging than finding people that can just play the songs well enough that it sounds okay. It's like to actually find a dynamic of band members that get along and can deal with, you know, some of the situations that you get put in when you're on tour these days. You know, that's hard to come by. And also the fact that the two of us are in a band together, so the other two people in this one have to deal with that. So, you know, that's challenging too. Although I will say, like, you know, we've had our moments over the years, but the last like couple tours we've done, we haven't had any problems. There's been no like, oh, this is the moment where Sarah and Jeff kill each other and we almost like drive off the road and crash into a tree. So, you know, that hasn't happened in a while. So, you know, I think we actually maybe have grown up to a point where maybe we'll be okay. But from what I hear about people being in bands, you know, you can be 50 years old and still have stuff like that happen, you know, just between people that are singers and guitar players in bands that aren't related. So.
Yeah, as far as like the chemistry thing goes, like, you know, we'll occasionally have people that ask us or ask me, like, you know, why don't you guys have like another guitarist, or like why don't you have like a fifth member, or whatever? And I'm like, honestly, because more than anything, I'm just like, yeah, the chemistry is pretty good, and I feel like including almost any other person in the equation would run the risk of changing it. And I would love to have you know, a fifth member if it could work, but it's like we've just been sort of like going with this for so long. And the thing is, like, lately there's been less cause than ever for us to like want to look into having another member, because years ago there was always this like, well, it would be great if we had a keyboard player or a guitarist / keyboard player that could do both, or, you know, whatever. There was like all this pressure to like fill out the sound live, because
we don't use tracks.
We don't use
very
backing
anti
tracks.
that. So.
But more recently, we've like gotten a lot more committed to sort of being like, well, we're gonna like go above and beyond as the four of us to like, you know, be the best we can. Which it has.
This I think has, you know, we can attribute this kind of thing to the Marillion obsession.
A little bit, yeah.
And also just listening to a lot of 70s bands, because, you know, especially if you read album credits, like a lot of people, you know,
did
so many things, right. You know.
So like like now at this point, like, you know, Sarah and I basically are trading off playing keyboards live. You know, I basically will play like during passages where there is no guitar, or the guitar is
he's feeling very fancy, he plays guitar with one hand and keyboards with the other.
The Tony McAlpine, Bob Patsionis trick. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not that good. I'm not like playing like synth leads and harmonizing them on guitar at the same time, but I can do some like, you know, kind of more basic stuff where if it's a relatively simple type of guitar part that I can either kind of all hammer on with my left hand, or just like play open strings with my right hand. I'm like, and then play like, you know, a simple like chord thing on top of it or whatever. But it's like, yeah, so I mean, I'm playing keyboards and Sarah's playing keyboards during a lot of like instrumental passages and stuff now, which really like helps fill out the sound. And backing vocals have also gotten a lot better over the years too, where it doesn't seem like there's like as much pressure to be like, oh, we could really use an additional singer, you know. Honestly, like the only thing that's stopping us from going even further with it, to where like I wouldn't even like, I know Rich wants to kind of entertain the idea of getting like the sort of like the digital Taurus pedals for the floor, where you can, you know, basically like hook it up and just trigger different, you know, sounds and stuff off of it. And like or like the idea of having 2 keyboards on stage or whatever. Like, we just don't have the logistical like budget or ability to set that stuff up in so many of our like gigging circumstances. And it's like, it sucks to get used to having something and then have to do a gig without it. But, you know, and it's like, especially like when we go out and do like support tour stuff or, you know, whatever. It's
you
like,
never want to seem like that band either. That like, you know, if we would have went out on tour with Saxon and brought all this crap out, and I feel like all of them would have just looked at us like, I mean, the thing is, they were actually super nice. So I don't actually know if anybody would have, but you know, in that situation and like support tours in general, we don't usually have much time to set up, and we don't have really any time to really be comfortable with stuff. So I wouldn't want to be dragging all this crap along with us and
Especially
have to try to like just flash set up all this technical stuff.
yeah, because it's just more stuff that can go wrong, and it's like we don't usually have somebody with us that's like sort of like a tech. You know, like when we tour, it's usually just us. Like we've done a couple of tours now where it's like, yeah, we're everything. You know, like Sarah and I basically split the driving, and she's basically our own merch person, and I'm basically like our own sort of like tour manager. You know, in terms of like logistics and, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, we're pretty used to like being like really DIY about stuff.
That's cool. That's wow. That's interesting. So how did you mentioned Saxon, that you were the support band for Saxon. How did that come about? When did you know somebody that knew somebody, or how was it?
Yeah, I mean, sort of.
Everything is always like, I knew a guy, like in some capacity, like not to obviously discredit the fact that like bands aren't getting this stuff unless, you know, they're good. But like, it is kind of about who you know, and it's like we were fortunate enough to basically have right around that time started to develop like a working relationship with a guy who is actually largely like retired from being an agent now.
He just books for Prague Power.
Yeah, he just books for the Prague Power USA Festival. But he, you know, used to be in that position where, you know, bands would approach him and be like, oh, we're looking for a support band for, you know, this many dates or whatever, you know, do you have anybody? And, you know, he'd refer them somebody. And
that was pretty much how that happened.
I guess he largely came to us over a lot of his other clients, because most of the other bands he works with are a little bit more, you know, super prog, like in a way that like would not mesh with like a Saxon and Armored Saint tour, right. You know, whereas it's like we have like enough of that traditional metal, you know, aspect to our sound. So, you know, he basically came to us and, you know, was like, well, they're looking for somebody. And of course, immediately we were like, yes. How do we do this? Because I'm like, I love both Saxon and Armored Saint a lot. Like, I mean, honestly, I didn't mention them when talking about it, but I mean, they're a pretty big influence, especially on like the way I write riffs. A lot of like the riff writing in Saxon's music, I think, is like really influential to a lot of our stuff. But you know, it just yeah, so naturally we were like super gung-ho about trying to do it, and we had to wait a few weeks for them to be like, oh well, you know, because in this business, like you never know that you have anything. It's always like, you know, oh, we came to you with this idea, but don't get your hopes up because we're probably also floating it to 8 other bands, and there's a potential that at the last minute they may just change their, like we've had that happen too, where like we've been
had
approached.
so many like almost
Yeah,
things.
if people knew like what our almost accomplished resume was, they'd probably, you know, be a lot more impressed. But yeah, so it's like we didn't know until I think about like 7 weeks actually before the tour that it was even gonna happen.
It was pretty
for
fast.
Sure. Like we only were able to like just, you know, just get like new merch printed in time and, you know, that type of stuff. I mean, it wasn't a big tour like in terms of length. We've done stuff that we were gone longer and traveled more miles. We only played like 8 shows, but I mean, they were largely all like really great venues, good markets, and it's like, yeah, the two bands, both Saxon and Armored Saint, like could not have been any nicer to us. It was honestly like really awesome, and I mean, I don't know if that was because they legitimately thought that we were good, or if they're just super nice to like anyone supporting them, but either way, like we actually came out of doing that tour with like, you know, some level of like friendship with a lot of those guys, to where, you know, we still will chit chat from time to time, and it's like, you know, well,
Paul Quinn gave Jeff a guitar.
Oh wow!
Like yeah, he ordered a guitar from Guitar Center, and like it was damaged when they sent it. And he was
Guitar
like so
Center's
mad
like the
about it.
worst company in the world to ever have to deal with.
And he was so mad about it, and it's just like he posted online about it, and like Paul Quinn just messaged him, was like, "You want my Epiphone Les Paul?" And he just like sent it here.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I paid for the shipping for him to send it from England, but yeah, it's like a '90s Korean made Epiphone. It's a really really nice guitar. It's actually probably one of the best sounding guitars I have, but yeah, like stuff like that. And like the few times that Saxon has toured since we've done that tour, you know, we've met back up with them and like gone out to dinner with Nigel, and Nigel actually wore our shirt on their one DVD that they've since put out. Like if you look, like there's some cool shots of him playing drums. You can clearly see like MindMaze shirt on the DVD, which I'm like, for me was like one of the most weirdly life-affirming things I think like has ever happened.
Great.
That's also where the Buc-ee's thing came from.
Yeah, Nigel turned us on to Buc-ee's.
That was when we learned about Buc-ee's. We didn't play in Texas like on that tour, so we didn't get to go there. But he was the one that told us about its existence and was like, "You have to go there," because he and his wife like were living in Texas for a while. They're currently in England again, but yeah, so he was really familiar with it, and we're like, "What the heck is Buc-ee's? This sounds like the stupidest thing ever." And then we went there in 2017, and it was pretty awesome. So
that's great. You mentioned earlier in the first of the interview about, you know, especially the new song and how collaborative it's been. What's studio like with the band? Is it a collaborative? I mean, it sounds like, Jeff, you write most of the music, correct? And Sarah, you're writing a lot of the lyrics. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
The last album, Resolve, was probably honestly like the most. Like, it's funny because like it was probably like the most collaborative in its own way, in the sense that like the first 2 albums, a lot of that material had, I mean, especially the first album, but even Back from the Edge, like a lot of those songs had been like fully written, fully fleshed out. We played a lot of them live. Like they were broken in when we went into the studio. So it was kind of just a matter of like, you know, get in there, record what we know we got to, you know what we got to do. And it's like, I kind of was usually just the one sitting there making this sort of like executive decisions on certain things, because it was just easier, you know. But it's like with Resolve, Rich actually contributed a decent amount of music. Like, I mean, he has like a co-writing credit on Moment of Flight from Back from the Edge, which was kind of a group writing thing for that song. But like a lot of Resolve, about half the album actually Rich and I kind of worked out together. You know, just sort of sitting around in our like rehearsal area, or like honestly like in our living room, just like, you know, guitar and bass or keyboard or whatever, and just sort of noodling. Like Rich actually wrote like some keyboard stuff that wound up on the album too. So like it was a lot. The other thing is that like we made Resolve when Mark was not technically officially in the band yet, even though he was playing with us, and he is on like a chunk of the album. I actually play drums on the rest of it, but that one was a little bit more like up in the air, to where like in the studio it was just like a lot more of a like, well, what do you think? You know, like one, Rich came in for that album and just like owned his fucking bass parts. Like, you know, to where I didn't feel like I had to do anything to be like, you know, oh, can you do this instead of this? Or that's not really going to work. We need to try this. Or, you know, like I didn't have to be like hands-on about it because of like where he was at the time. And yeah, I just kind of like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it was just like more of a like, we went into the album without as much of a completely, obviously there was like conceptually a complete preconceived notion, but most of the material on Resolve was like never even played with a band, not even just live, but just with a band before we recorded it. So there was just a lot more sitting in the studio. It's also why the album took a while to make, is that it's like there was a lot more sitting in the studio and just being like, what should we do here? You know, like, you know, how do you want to do this part? Or do you want, you know, and like taking stuff like section by section by section, certain songs. And, you know, that's just, it was really weird then to have to basically after the fact be like, okay, now we have to learn some of this stuff that we like basically created in a studio environment. Again, it's like the only time we've ever done anything like that, where everything else was always like, we've played it ad nauseum before going into the studio. But with Resolve, there was a lot of like, when we were recording it, we were like, well, we only got to get it once, you know, we only got to like some of these like complicated runs and, you know, weird time things. I'm like, well, it's only got to be right once to record it. And it's like, then, you know, trying to come back to it after the fact and be like, oh crap, now we have to actually play it.
Nice. You said you've been doing some writing, and I know you mentioned the possibility of an EP coming out. Are you starting to flesh out some ideas for another album?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh boy, it's been like, it's weird. We weren't really doing much, and then, you know, Jeff just like recently had a real like creative streak where he was just coming like home from work every night and recording demos and working on songs. And, you know, we are now working on how many more we pretty much have demos for, like four songs.
Yeah.
So it's
and
like,
I mean, one of them's like 10 minutes long too. So
of course,
we got to throw those people a bone on every album.
Right.
but it's like, that's where we're kind of like, you know, we're sort of in this weird limbo area, because depending on what happens with whatever labels we shop to and what they want to offer us, or what route we decide to go, you know, we're going to at least put out an EP, because we did run a Kickstarter for one, and, you know,
Those people
owe
are
people
still
that. And I legitimately feel like terrible for how long it's taken, but it's just been a set of weird like,
thankfully most of our like fan base, I think at this point, like we've done a number of crowdfunding projects, like they trust us that like
we're not just going to like run away with their money and never put anything out. So.
Yeah. I'm like, at this point, I'm like, even if the band, I mean, this is not going to happen, but I'm like, even if the band were to like break up tomorrow, I'm like, people would still get music out of what you know has happened, because like there is like legitimately multiple tracks like done, at this point. You know, the music
So
exists.
yeah, we've been using those tracks that are pretty much done as what we've been sending around to try to see what interest there is. And, you know, yeah, a lot of times with labels, when they want to pick something up or put it out,
I
like,
have to pee.
oh good, I actually can talk now. But when labels want to put something out, a lot of times the labels will be like, yeah, we don't really want to put out an EP. We just want a full-length album. So we pretty much knew, you know, trying to go with this strategy of possibly shopping it to labels and stuff, that, yeah, we could use the EP songs that we'd already pretty much finished to, like, try to get a label to be interested in it. But they likely wouldn't come back and be like, yeah, we want to just put out an EP. They might want a full-length album. And that was ultimately like why we were going to do an EP independently, because it was the same deal with Inner Wound. Like, they kind of just, it was different circumstances at the time that we ran the Kickstarter. But it was kind of just like, yeah, if you guys want to do a full length, we're interested in putting that out. But if you're not, then, like, we kind of don't want to. And which I get, because some people just aren't interested in buying physical copies of, you know, EPs or singles or anything like that. I know a lot of metal fans that are like huge collectors that kind of just want anything and everything they can get, but not everybody's like that. And a lot of times, from like a safer business perspective, labels just want full-length albums. So we kind of had that in mind, and, you know, we're like, well, we can't play shows right now. We really can't do anything else. We might as well try to work on doing some more songs. So if a label does come back to us and say, hey, we want to put this out, where's the rest of it? You know, all we have to do at that point is then go in and record it and, you know, get it mixed and everything. And it's not like, oh crap, we don't have any more songs, we have to write those all. So
yeah, the big game changer too, like, just recently has been that I actually went to school for audio production, but despite that, I have never had a decent home recording setup until now, basically. And I mean, it's still not like I'm not ready to like make a real album in the basement, but like, you know, it's at least gotten to the point where I'm able to put together demos that actually sound pretty good. Like, they're enjoyable to listen to. And, you know, I can do that efficiently. And, like, I've actually been doing some stuff, too, where, like, I'm working with, like, other people on doing things and recording, like, little bits and pieces of things here at home, which is cool. But it's, like, it's allowing me to just be a lot more efficient than I have been in the past, with just sort of like, oh, I have an idea. Well, I can do something with that idea right now. As opposed to, like, you know, oh, I have an idea. The rest of the band just has to believe me for, like, you know, a little bit till I can kind of flesh this out. And it's also just easier then, because then I don't have to, like, sort of explain things to people by being like, oh, it's like this. It's similar to this. It's like, no, it's just this. Like, and now I can just be like, this is the idea in my head. So I think that, you know, that's definitely that. This is like literally only within the past, like, maybe like 2 to 3 months. And it's like literally I got this stuff set up, and it was pretty much like immediately was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can just write. Which is cool, because I've been like mentally collecting ideas for a long time. Like, that's usually what I do. Like, I'll go a year without actually like writing a song, like writing anything like fully fleshed out, but I'll just kind of like mentally archive, you know, riffs or ideas or whatever. So when the time comes, it's kind of just like, oh, I want to do something like this. I need a part like this. Oh, I have a riff that kind of fits that, or, you know, whatever. So
cool. Nice. So I guess at this point, you know, hard to say when a new album will be coming out, but hopefully within the next year, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, the goal at this point is whatever we plan to do. We plan to have it like decided what way we're going to go, whether somehow we're putting out a full length or we're just putting out an EP by, like, you know, early of next year, so we can go into the studio and record, like, probably next, you know, like early in the year or spring, we could finish recording all this stuff we're writing now.
Yeah, I mean, basically, right now, I would say this is sort of what we've discussed, is that one way or another, I intend to have something new physically released when we play Prog Power next September. That is definitely like the plan. I mean, partially because it's a smart business decision, because, you know, if we're going to play an event with a guaranteed large audience like that like loves, from experience, I mean, and I'm one of them, loves to buy music, like, you know, it would be a horrible missed opportunity to not have something new out for people to buy. But it's also just that, like, the timing works out nice. It would be like a good occasion to, like, mark the release of something with, and it gives us enough time, I think, that whether we're talking about an album with a deal in place, we would have enough time to make that happen by then. And if not, if we are self-releasing an EP, and that's not even to say that if we self-release this EP in the end anyway, that it's not going to mean that the next full length is with a label. It still might. It's just that, depending, again, like, you know, what actually happens. But if we self-release the EP, I think the physical product will be out at that point. You know, again, it would be almost stupid not to, and especially since at this point there's really not a lot holding it back. It's just a lot of red tape. You know, it's a lot of, like, red tape and, like, hypotheticals and, you know, business strategy, I guess. You know,
Peanuts walking by us.
Well, we couldn't have done this without a cat guest appearance. Yeah, basically, like, as soon as whatever we're doing gets decided on, we're pretty much gonna be
literally just laid down like that.
We're pretty much gonna be, like, ready to go with that EP then, if we're self-releasing it. Like, the artwork is even done. You know, like, the artwork has been done, like, for a long time, actually. But yeah, so it's like we kind of have a lot of the ducks in a row, and the material that would appear on the EP as an EP is basically done. Like, yeah, like, maybe I'd want to touch up the mixes a little bit, like, in places, but, like, everything's recorded. You know, everything's there, and the mixes are close, at least. So, you know, yeah, I don't really see a lot of, like, a roadblock there.
Nice. So you mentioned Prog Power as, you know, next September. Do you have anything, especially with COVID now, I'm sure everything's kind of up in the air. Do you have any other future gigs, anything planned currently?
We're playing. We have another festival, like, that's supposed to be.
Yeah, that got moved.
Yeah, that got postponed. We were supposed to play Mad with Power Fest that Ty from Lords of the Trident puts on in Wisconsin, which we've never played in Wisconsin, so that'll be a first. But
we've driven through it. We've had the cheese.
Yeah, I literally, when we went on tour a few years ago, I got a mug that just said cheese on it from Wisconsin. So, but yeah, so we're playing that festival in August. So far, that's all we have, you know, lined up.
Just because they're the only two dates we had this year that got, like, postponed rather than just canceled indefinitely. Like, there were some other things we were booked to do or intending to do this year that, whenever it's possible to actually do them again, you know, we're gonna do that. Like, basically, if gigging can resume in some normal capacity by, you know, next, you know, summer, we'll be out there. You know, we'll be, you know, Prog Power, Mad with Power, and probably some, you know, a few other gigs, you know, trying to hit some of the, like, you know, regional areas. Like, we like to play in Baltimore a lot. We play up in Massachusetts a lot, you know. And I'd like to go back to some of those, because that's just where like our highest concentrations of fans seem to be. So it's like it's always like a really safe bet. It's like, oh, if we play a show in Baltimore or in like Worcester, Massachusetts or whatever, like we know we're going to have a good crowd, and we know it's going to be a fun show, and we're dealing with a promoter that'll pay us. Like, so yeah, I mean, we want a gig, so it's just a matter of like we're not stupid like about it. We're all very much on the same page as far as like we aren't as much as we want to do it, we're not in a rush.
Because it's not like a lot of people just are like, oh, well, as soon as regulations allow, like as soon as we're allowed to, but it's not even as simple as that, because so many things got canceled that so many things are going to have to get rescheduled. And then also a lot of people just aren't going to feel comfortable going out for a while after this anyway, even if it's allowed. And I don't want to play a whole bunch of shows in venues that have to be at like 1/3 capacity, or just venues that are 1/3 capacity, even if they don't have to be, because people just don't feel comfortable. Right. So,
not to mention, it's like I don't want to be someone out there that's like contributing to kind of screwing everyone else over in the bigger picture, And I mean, also, we're not out to make a political statement about it. Like, I feel like a lot of bands that are gigging right now, or trying to gig in any way they can, like, for some artists, I do respect that it's like they need a paycheck, they don't have a lot of other options. But it seems like a lot of people that are gigging right now are leaning really heavily into doing it kind of to make a political statement, or like a pseudo political statement or something. And it's like we as a band just don't want to do that. Like it's not that like, oh, we don't have ethics. It's actually like the opposite. It seems like the most ethical thing we can do is just saying, when the time's right, we'll get back to it. But until then, we're okay with just being like, we'll just not play, or play like streaming stuff if we can do that, or maybe like an outdoor gig here or there, like if that can be done in like a feasible sense. But I'd much rather abstain completely and be able to play Prog Power next year rather than play a bunch of crappy like local regional shows just to like 30 people here or there, and then like the major touring market doesn't come back for 4 more years or something, So I'm only looking at it from like the perspective more of a music fan than a musician. Like, I want real concerts back, So it's like, it's not even just about us. And it's like, normally it seems like unfortunate to be a musician that isn't making their living from music. But in the case of us, this year,
we have more money than usual from a band perspective, because we're not spending it on stuff.
Right.
Like, I mean, like, we're making stuff, but usually the things that make us spend the most money are, getting merch items, which we've done,
yeah, it's
but
not even just
we did
that.
pre-orders.
It's the fact, like, for me, it's the fact that like I haven't had to take off any time from work this year. Like, I mean, I work for like a grocery delivery service. Not to, some musicians are like, don't talk about your day job. You have to act like you don't have one. But I'm like, I work for a grocery delivery service, so I've worked this entire time, like more hectic than usual. So. But I mean, I like my job, and it's like the thing that's nice about it is that, yeah, I haven't had to take off. Like, normally I use up all of my paid time off by like halfway through the year, because between, whether it's touring or just gigging or going to gigs sometimes too, like I keep having to take days off here and there. It's like this year I was just able to just like work straight through, and it's like with no, there's less stuff to spend money on, not going to gigs, and, yeah, there's no expenses of playing gigs. I mean, no, we're not seeing as much money come back, whether it's getting paid for gigs or selling more merch or whatever. But, yeah, it's just allowed for us personally. And I mean, we're very fortunate. Like, I don't want to diminish like anything.
Yeah, for the first time ever, we're very fortunate to just work at grocery stores and not get paid for music. So, you know, usually, like he said, usually that's like supposed to be bad, but in this case, it actually is good because it means that our musical, like the health of our band, had like from a perspective of the business or whatever, hasn't really been affected by this at all, other than, yeah, like we haven't been able to see as much profit from things we might have sold, but then there's also not the expense of us having to go out and tour or do stuff.
There's also not like a weird omnipresent like outside pressure to hustle this year either, which is kind of nice too. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I love doing most of the stuff that would be categorized as some form of hustling for a band, but like when you are a band that has to work your day jobs and, you know, music is only like a part of your life, it can feel like everyone else is just sort of, you know, leaving you in the dust because you can't be out there all the time. And it's like this year it's been kind of nice that we've sort of gotten a little bit of a break from it, which I think has just been good for all of our mental health. And it's also, it's funny, and it's not funny, but it's ironic because it's so different from what so many other people are going through. And again, it's like we're very, very lucky in that regard that it's like we, you know, none of us financially were hurt by this, you know, and it's just actually allowed us a lot of time to write and enjoy downtime and actually value the time that the four of us as a band get to spend together too, because we've been able to get together to do more things than just play a gig, you know?
Yeah, like yesterday, you know, we went to the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. It was my birthday. And I actually was like, wow, I really just miss hanging out as like the four of us driving around, because I made a joke that we should just get in the car and just drive on the highway to nowhere and pretend we're on tour, because
yeah, I'm like,
it's actually like enjoyable to me. Like, so some people are like, why would you like just driving around in a van that's dirty with a bunch of like people like that play music? And I'm like, because I don't know, it's fun. Like we just talk about like the most stupid things ever. I mean, it's usually just random stuff, but it's also about music and just whatever, and you know, things we drive by. Like we have inside jokes about like all these random towns we drive by all the time, and it's just, yeah, it's just fun. It's something that I enjoy doing. So yeah, when we actually got together and drove somewhere together as the four of us yesterday, I was like, oh wow, yeah, I've actually missed this.
I made the joke that I'm like, all right, now we need to get like a really, really bad hotel room and just like move a washing machine up a flight of stairs to simulate moving gear.
That's our new workout program. We'll just put heavy things in the car and then drive somewhere and come back to them.
That's not a bad idea. You could market that.
I mean, yeah, it's not like it wouldn't be
Tour
good.
simulator.
It wouldn't be good. Yeah, it would definitely help you as far as like physical fitness is concerned. But I mean, you know, like I've actually been able to do other things that I enjoy that aren't just, you know, working. I mean, not that no one really enjoys work, but I do like my job, so I don't mind it. I like going there for the most part. But you know, I've actually been able to do other things. Like I've spent a lot more time doing photography and taking pictures of stuff, which I really do enjoy. I got a new camera like earlier in the year, and that's been really helpful for like mental health reasons to just go out and do that. And I've started like hiking, and which is something I never ever did before. Like I like doing stuff nature wise, but I never was like, I'm going to go out hiking. But I kind of started doing that because that was really the only thing I could do. There wasn't much anybody could do that wasn't outside or just in your yard or something. So it was one of those things that I actually could do. So I said, whatever, let's just start doing this. And now I actually really like it. So yeah, I think there's, in a way, there's been some good things about everything that's happened. you know, despite how not good it is.
It's not, they're not good things. Like, I don't ever, like, again, they're not good. They're just, it's finding the upside in a bad situation, I guess.
That's a good point. That's a good way to look at it. So last question for you.
Good timing. Like, we have to wrap this up in like the
we
next,
actually
like,
have
10-ish
practice
minutes.
in like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. So real quick, for both of you. So as you probably know, my blog is Brews and Tunes. I pair craft beer with heavy metal music. So you finish a gig, you finish, you know, recording session, whatever, you know, kicking back at home. What beer do you crack open, and what album do you put on?
We are like the worst band in the world to ask that question. Basically, I really think like only one member of the band actually drinks beer, and it's Rich. I drink, but I like had this like radical shift to my diet like 2 years ago now, which is why I like lost like 70 pounds. That like I basically like cut out like the vast majority of all of the sugar and like carbs from my diet. So it's not like I'm not that strict about it to where I can't cheat, but I was never a big beer person in general, so that's just not like what I'm gonna choose to go to.
Really, you had an excuse there to just say that's why you don't drink beer anymore, and you're just like, no, well, I really didn't like it anyway. Just you need to know.
Yeah, so I'm like, I don't even have like a good answer.
He could give you an album, yeah. I'm sure.
I'm like, as far as I'm like,
I'll give you 10.
Yeah, I'm like, as far as alcohol is concerned, I'm like, my two go-to drinks are usually either White Russians, which isn't just because of the Marillion tie-in, and it's like I'll drink like Coke Zero with like Southern Comfort, but
what was that beer that you did like before?
Magic Hat?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like Magic Hat number 9 is usually what I would like drink if I was gonna buy beer. But yeah, for like relaxing albums or whatever, like I mean the Marillion stuff's pretty good for a lot of that. I'm trying to think. Like I've been listening to a lot of like jazz fusion lately, so like 70s stuff, you know. But I don't know. I can never pick one thing. I can't.
I mean, yeah, for me, I'm like, I just really don't drink much at all. And we could tell the stories as to why that's not a good decision.
Because she can only have one drink.
Yeah, I was actually proud of myself. I went out yesterday and I had 2 drinks out in public and I wasn't like drunk. So that was, I'm just like a real lightweight and stuff really affects me a lot. I've said that I feel like, I don't know, like, yeah, my body's just really sensitive to everything. So I tend to have one drink and then just it's like I'm giggling and just acting like an idiot. So, but yeah, I usually drink like fruity drinks. I can usually do like I find that like the hard ciders are usually pretty good. I kind of actually like those, but you know. Yeah, we're really lame for this question.
We're like,
I feel like legitimately bad.
We're the least cool band ever.
But like as far as albums go, I'm like I don't know. Like I don't know that I ever want to just put on something that's gonna put me in a chill mood. Rich.
This is the Rich question. It really is.
But you know, I was just thinking about it earlier, and like Jeff was playing bass and played a song off of it, and I just, you know, I'm in the mood to listen to it now. And I always have to talk about Winger in some capacity, but like Pull by Winger is like just one of those albums I'm like never sick of hearing. Like I just love it. I think Winger in general is underrated, but that album in particular is, you know, probably my favorite album of theirs. It's either that or 4, but it's underrated, and I feel like more people need to realize how heavy Winger is, and you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now that I actually had like a second there while she was talking to sort of think. Yeah, as far as like stuff that I tend to go to, that again, it's like more of like a vibe, more of a, not necessarily relaxing, but like a little bit more like low key albums I like to listen to in headphones or full listens. Like, I'm not the biggest Pink Floyd fan, but like The Wall is definitely like a go-to for that, or like the Who's Quadrophenia, like those like 70s proggy kind of like rock opera concept albums are really good for that. And like Opeth's Damnation is pretty like chill type album, or like Anathema, or shit, there was like one other thing I wanted to mention. I don't remember what it was. I forgot. King's X is a band I also listen to a lot when I'm in kind of like more of like a chilled out type of mood, I guess, especially like at this like summer and fall seems like more seasonally appropriate.
Nice. That's cool. Very cool. Well, thank you both so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm excited for the new music that's going to be coming our way in the not too distant future. So yeah, again, thank you very much for doing this. I'll let you get to band practice.
Thank you for having us and listening to us ramble for forever.